Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Carpenter, your host, and with me today, of course, is Mr. Matt Germain with our special RaysUp edition. And as you well know by now, Matt really has his finger on the pulse when it's anything coming on with the Tampa Bay Rays. And man, there has been some news this week. Hey, Matt, how you doing today, brother?
Oh, I'm just bored in Rays land. It's one of those low-key seasons with not much going on. I almost feel like we're the Mets, for crying out loud.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, boy. I mean, well, I'm looking here now, too. We'll talk a little bit about the ugly story out there in a minute. But if we take a global view of what's been happening, Rays have got, only 41 games left, I think, this season?
Yeah, it's getting down to the time when you start crunching the numbers about who's standing where and who's going to wind up where. So there's a few teams you can almost start, looking at their timeline and trimming it down. Like, I think the Yankees are one bad series away or two from being, on the cusp of being counted out. On the flip side, they do control their own destiny of who they face. So there are situations like that, right? So I think they see the Blue Jays 6 times and the Rays sees them 6 times. So if the Blue Jays end up being lackluster, they could still squeak in. But
yeah, and that's going to be a neat trick. I mean, right now, you could count down 1 through 10, going from AL East first to the fifth person in the, or I should say, fifth team in the AL Central, as far as being able to see, who those were. By that I mean, all teams in the AL East had been above AL Central until recently. I think the Yankees fell down to where they only have 60 wins and 58 losses. And the Twins, who are leading the AL Central, have 62 wins and 58 losses. But still leaves the Yankees ahead of everybody else in the AL Central outside of the Twins. But I don't know, man. Let's talk about the Rays. So quickly, we can't help but face the elephant in the room, and that's Wander Franco.
Yep.
First,
5'8" elephant.
Oh my gosh. And we were all concerned about him, and we worried about what's going on in the locker room, and teammates aren't getting along. And then this past week or so, he started coming alive again, man. He started looking great at the plate. He was coming up with some of these outrageously insane, great catches out there. And also I'm thinking, okay, good. Things are really starting to look good. And then the other day, Cash gave him his day off of rest, and don't know if that was the only reason he gave it to him, because what was about the 5th inning of that game, he was actually pulled out of the dugout for questions about a relationship with a young woman. And what may or may not have happened there is something that maybe he knows and maybe that young woman knows, but the rest of us, it's all conjecture. And I got to tell you, man, when I turned on the TV yesterday morning, actually should say YouTube, I was inundated with story after story after story of all these YouTubers who had something to say about what's going on with Wander. And I thought, dude, come on. I said, let the process take a look at what's happening with this young man. And if there's something there, discover it, put it out there, and make whatever you have to do, whatever changes have to be made.
Yeah, I think, it's one of those situations where we've seen it in the past where, there's certain situations that happen that once they're cleared up, they don't seem nearly as bad as what they were. And then we've also seen the flip side. For instance, I can't remember, was it Felipe Vasquez with the Pirates or something like that, which the situation turned out worst.
Yeah. So we don't know, and so therefore no conjecture.
The player was played or whatever.
So we don't know. We'll find out in time, and that's not really why I watch the game anyway.
The only thing I will say is that if there's one organization that can get over it, their star shortstop being on the mend, so to speak, politically speaking, it's the Rays. The Rays have enough shortstop talent all the way down that Wander Franco could be out the next 5 years and they'd still make the playoffs. So I'm not worried about will it be as great of a Rays team? No, it won't, because Wander Franco, has playoff experience. He has been the best shortstop in Major League Baseball this year, even with the the inner workings and the slumping after he was benched and everything else. He is still an elite talent that is hard to replace. Now, what impact does his personality have on the rest of the team? And this is where because I was listening to WDAE earlier today, and they were talking about, Wander Franco is you can't replace him. He's just the way he is, whatever. Yeah, that's true. That's on his personal playing and his own at bats. But the impact he has through the rest of the team, if it's negative, and we can't say whether or not it is, but apparently it was enough that they suspended him. So, that kind of thing can go through the rest of the team to the point where it's a distraction. It unfocuses them. It gets them playing without joy in the game. And in a way, that's what we saw last night. There was a lot of youth, a lot of exuberance, a lot of happiness, a lot of people that were more relaxed than they've been in a long time. Now, yeah. I don't know if that's going to continue going forward, but it was interesting to see. And you could just tell the demeanor of the players was complete. And really, if they were so focused on Wander Franco that they were, distracted by it, you would think they would have a drop in performance, not a rise in performance. And it was the complete opposite. And the Giants are not an easy team to play. So one game isn't, the be all end all, but it is interesting that they're at the point now where we're starting to look at that. What does it mean for the Rays going forward? Because there is a very good chance that if he's charged with anything whatsoever, he'll lose his work visa, and it won't even be in the Rays' hands of what they do with him. It just won't be available to them.
I haven't even thought about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would remove the whole issue, and then it comes down to figuring out the legalities of what contracts are, et cetera, when things like that happen. But it was. You're talking about that. I mean, last night, the response to the players, I was listening to WDAE for a little bit. And one of the things they were saying is, well, wasn't it a great thing that they were actually out of town so they didn't have to listen to the same questions over and over about Wander? And I thought, well, that's probably true. And there was a piece of news last night that came out that was fantastic. And that was, guess what? Mr. Glasnow's taking the mound. Yeah, we thought we were going to have him a few days ago, but he's still having some tightness, I guess, in his back. And then last night he came and took the mound and did pretty daggone good.
Yeah, he looked strong. It's what you want to see. And, you start looking at pitchers right from this point, really, until the end of September to see where they're headed when they get to the playoffs. And if Glasnow, he has plenty of innings left on his arm this year. There's no worries about that. So if his back can hold up and be strong going into the playoffs, any team would like to have him as their number one going into the playoffs. So the Rays are still strong on that point.
Well, as long as we're talking about pitching, let's talk about the trade with Cleveland. Kyle Manzardo. We trade him away for Aaron Civale, a pitcher. And thoughts on Civale's performance thus far? I know it's only been 2 games with the Rays, but how do you feel about him?
I feel, when a pitcher's tinkering with things and they're not really being themselves, that's how I feel with Civale. It's almost like he's going through spring training again. And I don't know if a lot of that is the relationship with the catchers, if it's his own personal tweaks on his arsenal, or there's a lot going on for him right now. So I'm giving him like the 5-start leniency, basically. And then once the 5 starts are in, I expect him to improve and to be strong. If he does that, that's still heading into the playoffs. That's still, where you want to be. So I'm not really worried yet, but I am keeping a good eye on him because they did pay a steep price.
Oh, yeah.
And you definitely want to get your values worth if you're giving up Kyle Manzardo, which I expect to be a beast at the plate for years.
Yeah, I was a little concerned about it, but God's honest is we needed somebody pitching. There's been so many injuries, and I did find it amusing that he's going to, against his old team there. And I wonder if Francona was taking a little jab at him, because the first 2 at bats, which also were the first 2 pitches, both were bunts.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Oh gosh, I don't know how I feel about bunts sometimes, but I found it amusing that night, at least the way to start the game with the poor guy. But they got the first guy, he bunt, he got on base. The second guy, they got out. The first guy was on, I think it's probably Quan, made it to second with just two pitches. But
here's what I'll say about that trade, though.
Please.
When they gave up Joe Ryan, I was irate. Yeah. But I understood the trade because they were going for it, and Nelson Cruz was supposed to perform, to a much higher level. But what I hated about that trade more than anything was the control difference. So I knew they weren't going to sign Nelson Cruz for the next season. And that's what I like about the Aaron Civale. So Aaron Civale could, flop the rest of the year, and it still wouldn't really matter because they still have him for 2 more years. And to me, that's the key difference in this trade is that, yes, they gave up Manzardo, but they get, 3 years to figure out what they can do, what they have in Civale, and then carry on from there. So I like the trade overall. I think the only other person I could have seen them, go for was the guy out of Detroit, Michael Lorenzen. And if they wanted to extend it, but you're not giving up Kyle Manzardo for, half season of Michael Lorenzen. So that's where I was fearing is that Manzardo would have been dealt for a half season of anybody. Then I would have been a little bit less welcoming of the trade.
I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays out as far as Civale. You're giving him a little bit more leeway than I probably would. I'm not. I'm jumping down his throat after only playing 2 games with us. It's me. You know that I'm so reactionary.
It's all good.
Hey, but let's go back to Monday at one of your tweets, and you listed about 5 or 6 things of what we thought was happening with the season and what was happening. Do you have that there with your bullet points in front of me? Because if not, I can read them to you.
Oh, I don't have I didn't even have Twitter open, which is yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'll run down the list here of what you had. Let's see. 1, begin season with historic start, look unstoppable. 2, lose Springs, Rasmussen to injury, keep winning. 3, Franco suspended for being bad teammate. I guess this is 3.1. Terrible July. Result, lose McClanahan. Oh, good Lord. 4, add P at deadline, continue to fight through. And 5, Franco recent news. Jeez. Yeah, I can see why you're bored.
It's a roller coaster season.
Oh, good Lord.
You just want to enjoy the season, right? And I think most baseball fans are used to the torture unless they're casual fans. They know there's going to be pain somewhere along the season. You never escape it. But I think the Rays this year, and then we thought we had lived through the worst of it last year, I thought. And then this year, it just seems to be like to an elite level. You lose 3/5 of your rotation, the most elite portions of that, and your star phenom player. So, I mean, it would be the equivalent of Jarrett Cole, Nestor Cortez, and Luis Severino all being out for the Yankees, and Aaron Judge being completely out. Like, imagine the Yankees without that, right? But the Rays just keep steaming along. And I think that's really impressive. But it is frustrating, regardless of how they're doing.
Well, let's take a look at those guys that have come up and made a difference. I mean, Wander Basabe. I mean, you've got him. You've got let's see. I don't know. Do you want to talk about the prospects first and see some of those guys that are coming up?
Well, everybody's gotten to enjoy watching Osleivis Basabe, and I've been, piping him up a long time. He's an electric guy, puts the bat on the baseball as good as anybody. He's aggressive, but he can also extend his reach to the point where he gets the pitches away and he takes what the pitchers give him, which is why he has a higher batting average than somebody that tries to pull the ball a lot. He plays very solid at all the positions in the infield. To me, he's a huge asset, and he's ahead of Vidal Brujan by a country mile at this point. So I don't expect to see Vidal Brujan much from this point forward. They'll just let him keep getting seasoning down in the minors, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them move on in the offseason. But Osleivis Basabe has really come into his own. And now that they've brought in Carson Williams behind him, I don't think anybody else is going to get that much shortstop time with that team. So the other guys that they have are Curtis Mead. Everybody's seen a little bit of him. He's an elite bat. So he's going to earn his paycheck by by hitting the ball, and he's going to open up a lot of eyes about the potential that there is in Australia, which is great because the ABL needs that kind of spotlight. And I think he's still allowed, even with the Rays. It's part of his contract where he can go there in the winter and keep getting seasoning as long as he's healthy. He plays for Adelaide down there, and he's just an excellent person. Plays a decent second base. I think it's passable. It's a little bit like Isaac Paredes. But third base is his position. He's had some elbow and arm issues. He's not the strongest throw across the diamond. So I fully expect either Carson Williams or Junior Caminero to take that spot over at some point. Wouldn't be surprised to see Curtis Mead in left field or first base eventually. But when you look at, the future of the Rays, when Yandy Diaz's contract comes due, or they don't want to pay him, what he's earning, Curtis Mead can slide into that role easily and be more than enough. And I think that's a big reason as to why they dealt Kyle Manzardo, because they don't see Curtis Mead at third base long term. And even if they do, then that means Junior Caminero goes into first base, or others. They have other options, obviously. But and then we saw Jacob Lopez on the mound. He's a lefty that I think can have some serious impact in the playoffs as a 2-inning guy, 3-inning guy, really save the pen, be a shutdown guy. I like him better than Colin Poche at this point. So it tells you a lot about, his potential. I see, length and that the Rays really need right now because they're not sure what they're going to get, all the way through. I'm hoping Taj Bradley's latest start in Durham carries forward. So it'll be a toss-up between Lopez and Bradley the next time they need a spot starter for the 5th spot. But the schedule's pretty light in August, so they're making do with the pen for now. So yeah, that's a lot of youth, a lot of talent. The Rays are starting to promote aggressively through the minors, and when they had Carson Williams skip AA to go to AAA, that's significant. A lot of times they want them to go to AA because their D requires it as they adjust to the pitching. I think the Rays are confident enough at this point that his D plays to the AAA level, no problem. He's an elite defender. So they're hopeful that his bat, with power alone will be enough to get him into Major League Baseball. So they're hedging their bets. They're saying, you know what, we're going to get you the best experience that you can get before this whole Wander Franco experience, carries through. And if we need to call on you, then you've had some AAA time and you're better prepared in case we need you. So overall, I think the Rays are in a great spot depth-wise.
Well, depth-wise, you hit it. I mean, the more I think about it, I keep seeing the Orioles from what they were last year to this year. There is so much young blood on that team, and it's making a difference. They had a strong farm system that has continued to build the Orioles to who they are right now today. That's something. But I look at our core too, and I found today it was announced that Manuel Margot, he's going to have surgery of some sort to remove whatever floating objects, I think, around the man's elbow, and he may be out for a while. So you look at the other guys. What is it? Brandon Lau. I was so concerned about him with his back and everything, but this past week, he's starting to look like, wow, the best Brandon Lau we had. That one where he dove over to lay himself straight out to catch, one ball coming in there, and at the plate, he seems to be performing so much better than he has. So, I was ready to trade him a few months ago, but he's really shining. And let's see, Sirian and Rosarina, they're going to be there. I really truly believe, unless Rosarina, I think somebody told me he's got Scott Boras as his agent. So who knows where that'll land.
Here's what I'm going to say about the Manuel Margot injury. Like, he's so far this season, he's had small, tiny hot streaks here and there and some big hits in some key moments, but he's an 85 WRC plus. So weighted runs created, which means he's about 15% below average at the plate. I think it's a boon really to Luke Raley and Josh Lowe. And I like the fact they're going to get more playing time because of this, I think. And it also opens up the possibility of having Curtis Mead go slide into left field once in a while. The Rays are known to not be shy about trying, players in new positions if need be. But I think I'm not saying it's a good thing that Manuel Margot got hurt, but it does open up more regular playing time for certain players on the team who have much better bats than Manuel Margot. So in a way, it might help their lineup production significantly.
I'm looking forward to seeing these young people doing a lot more with us, and certainly as we move to the playoffs. But I'm looking at these folks too, down a list of what the Rays, how they're delivering. Let's see. I don't know if this is information from 2 days ago or today. Diaz, he was up for 125 hits for this year. Franco was right behind him with 124. Randy was at 105, and Josh Lowe was 97. Home runs. Let's see. Paredes and Siri were both at 23. Randy was 18. Franco 17. Can't see. Then I know Rayleigh and somebody else, Diaz, were both 16 for home runs. Then J-Lo, 15 and 14. So you're looking across all these guys. I mean, Paredes with RBS leads that with 69, Randy at 68. Where you see there's a lot of guys who are really performing here, really making a difference. It's not like one guy's coming in with 40 home runs and that's it. There's a lot of strength performance across the entire lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And they did, like, just as an extra note, they did sign in the minor leagues Raimel Tapia, who can play all three outfield spots like Manuel Margot can, but he's a left-handed bat. And to be honest, like, it might be a better fit for what the outfield needs. So in a way, against a right-hander, you can have Tapia with Josh Lowe and Luke Rayleigh, if ever he's called upon. But yeah, I think the Rays are in a solid spot. They have a lot of hot guys down in AAA. The one extra note I'll give is they send Francisco Mejia to Durham on a rehab assignment, and they have 5 catchers on that team. I don't even know how they're fielding a team, to be honest. How do you have a bench at all? If you're on the field, you know you're going to be in there no matter what. I guess that's the way.
But right now, what the Rays have is a Pinto and Bethancourt.
Yeah, they have Pinto and Bethancourt up right now, and Alex Jackson is the guy that they picked up that they're hopeful, can be an impact catcher at some point.
I want to take you back for a moment too. You were talking about Junior Caminero, and tell us a little bit more about his week last week in the minors.
So he went off basically. Like he's putting on a show in Montgomery to the likes that they haven't had much because they tend to be the one franchise affiliate that hovers around 500 in terms of winning percentage. They tend to have a few stars, but never really a complete team that's elite. And he hit 3 home runs in one game, and I don't mean just run of the mill kind of home runs that are just going across over the fence. He hit one that cleared the scoreboard that's hovering 50 feet above the fence in center field.
Jesus Christ.
I'm talking like 470 some odd feet. And this kid's 20. So he's putting on a show that is, when you look at the future of the Rays with him included, and Carson Williams and everybody else, you start to run out of spots to put guys. And the lineup is going to be lethal for years and years and years. The battle between the Orioles and Rays going forward is just ridiculous. And I look at the Blue Jays and Yankees in particular, and I think, how are you going to keep up? I don't see it. I don't see how they keep up. They just keep getting older and more fragile. The Jays don't have the system at all to keep up, so they're going to have to keep buying guys in free agency and hoping they pan out. But that doesn't always seem to work. The Red Sox are more able to stick around, I think. Their system has guys that keep positions that I think will really push them ahead. But their pitching is suspect, so they'll have to buy the pitchers. That tends to work out better, to be honest, than the player side. So I think you're going to see the Rays and O's dominate for years, and then the Red Sox kind of hover thirdish, as long as they make the smart investments along the way.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to one thing, which is talking about the minor leagues, and I continue to encourage people to go there. I mean, you get to see people like Junior Caminero. Was he with the Montgomery Biscuits at the moment?
That's right.
There's all these smaller towns that have these minor league teams. You get to see great talent. usually up closer than most of us will when we go to a major league team. And that's it. I'll tell you a quick story. Pardon me. Recently, when I was working at the Tampa Baseball Museum, helping out down there a little bit, I met a guy from Germany. He and his family were here and had on all his Mets gear. So, I'm always curious, folks from other countries and such, who are they following? Who's their team? And he said he came down here years back for the spring training, and I think Fort Myers, where the Mets were doing their spring training there. Anyway, he said, yeah, he says, we were there. He says, my brother was there. He was real excited because they had this football player, Tim Tebow, there, and everybody came to see Tim Tebow. And then there was this other guy people weren't paying attention to, and it was Mr. Pete Alonso. They're out there. And you may think you've come to see one person, but there's talent on the bench that you may not have any idea, of who they are today, but you keep your eye on them and you'll see it. I was looking at Vidal Brujan a few years back. And I was like, man, I can't wait to see him come up. He's done okay. Not as good as maybe a lot of us were thinking of, but said, yeah, watch that guy. Watch it. We'll see. And we'll see. Jonathan Aranda, man. Well, I'm tripping out here a little bit because all these guys are coming up from the minor leagues. It strengthens those communities, and it certainly strengthens, the major league team by able to have such wonderful players, such strong players coming up through the system. So I feel very blessed, if you will, to be able to be a fan of the Rays and be able to watch all this crazy insanity.
Yeah, I think it's important too. Like, you think about it this way: you can teach yourself and your kids or family, whoever you're going with, about just the major league side of things and only know that, or you can educate yourself about what there is out there, lengthwise. Like, where did these guys come from? How bad were they before they got great? How did they adjust from level to level? Like, it's nice to see that. You don't get that very much. Like, I grew up a hockey fan when I was a really young guy, and you never got to see much of the guys in junior because they were traveling all over the place, and you didn't always have a junior team in your city. But if you do, there's no way I would have avoided watching those teams, because you get to see those. So I lived in Halifax for a while, and Sidney Crosby was playing for the Rimouski Oceanic, and I went to see him every chance I got, and I got to see where he came from. And what he grew into, how small he was, and how he handled the puck at a young age compared to everybody else. And it gives you a different perspective once you see them actually perform at the major league level and the professional level. So I think, and it's also a good time. A lot of those teams put on a good show. That there's some fireworks, there's some decent food, there's always prizes. The kids get to run some races, do things. Like, it's all, a happy get together event, essentially. So I always see it as a great opportunity to get the family together, friends together, make new friends, whatever it is. And it doesn't cost an arm and a leg like Major League Baseball can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Trips we're going to make, I know we're putting down a couple of nickels more than I care to, but I definitely want to see some of the major league parks. But man, again, to me, some of the greatest excitement is at the minor league level, and kind of picking and seeing a couple of people, you say, okay, yeah, I saw them picked in the draft. Weren't they our fourth pick? And speaking of draft picks, shortstops they're in fair abundance there too. I was looking, it was like out of the first 5 or 6 from this recent draft, I think were shortstops for the Rays. It's like, wow. So obviously there's usually always a bunch of pitchers in there, but I was thought, I guess they're looking in the future. We've got some good people who can play a position, and certainly Basabe is one of them, but they're looking to the future, bringing even more of those folks in the most recent draft for in shortstop position as well. So
yeah, you can never have enough shortstops.
No.
If you can't fit them on your team, you can trade them for help. And we saw the Rays do that with Alika Williams this year. If you don't have the room, you can move on, and somebody will always be more than willing to open the door and give you something for them. So
what do you think's going to happen with Taylor Walls?
I think his days with the Rays are numbered.
Yeah.
I think there was a good chance that they were already, But I just think there's a limit to what he can provide offensively. I thought he was coming around at the beginning of the year, but it just isn't consistent enough. And I think there is a team out there that's going to benefit from that, and that's going to give him the playing time. And he's going to have some really good years, and he's going to have some really bad years. So I think, it's going to be a hard deal to make because they do value him a little bit like they did KK. And they keep mentioning that that's the way they look at him in the infield. But when you have Carson Williams sitting in AAA, it's much easier to do. And Carson Williams might not hit 300 in the season, but he's going to hit you 30 home runs and play elite D like Taylor Walls will. So I think that's more why I see him on the way out, is because Carson Williams is going to be with the Rays at some point.
Right.
And I think his bat has more potential.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think Taylor's probably one of those beloved players that everybody's going to say, "Oh my gosh, I hate to see him go." But let's see, 2023 regular season, his batting average is .211, so he's just above there. On base percentage of .315, and he's had some difficulties. So it's sad because he's got a lot of pop to himself as far as personality, and that's something I guess I've always been concerned about with the Rays. I've had this conversation with you before, whether it was Charlie Morton or Nelson Cruz and even KK. So who is that guy in the dugout today? In some ways, maybe it's a Rosarina. Some would say it's a quiet manner of Margot. And I don't know. Who do you see? Do you see a person in the clubhouse or anybody on that roster that you feel like that's a leader?
It's really hard to tell because we don't, hang out with the guys. We can't see how they, interact with one another. So I think, if you have a strong team, you have all kinds of leaders, and you don't need that one specific guy. I do think that when the Rays targeted Freddie Freeman, that's the role they envisioned for him.
Yeah.
Whether or not they try again with somebody else in that same kind of way, or if there is somebody like that that's available anytime soon, I'm not sure. But I think that's the kind of player that they would do it with. When I look around Major League Baseball at, who might become available, I don't think Pete Alonso is that kind of guy. I don't think he would rally everybody around him the same way that, Charlie Morton would.
Yeah.
But he would be a positive influence in on the team in general. I don't know. Sometimes it's a little bit overblown. Like let's take a look at the last few teams that made it, all the way to the World Series, like the Washington Nationals, for example. They didn't really have, they had some big name guys, but in terms of the lineup and then the position players, they were a really young team overall. They had a few guys that were seasoned veterans that kind of, were on the team, but the Rays sort of have that already, even with Brandon Lau and some of the other guys that are just steady presences. And so I think it's more important that the Rays be themselves as an organization. And I think the more that they have guys that grew up in that organization, the stronger they're going to be and the harder they're going to be to beat, because they are unified, and it'll help level those lulls to the point where they don't have steep, declines and inclines along the way. They're going to be more steady, and positive, you hope.
Well, I think it's a good point. I mean, it's good to have leaders, and there can be more than one leader with different, whether it's different things they're focusing on, maybe it's pitching, or maybe it's just even people with speaking the same language. There's within the groups, but they still come together cohesively, whatever there may be in between, whatever diversity that there may be in the leadership, the team as a whole comes together when it's the Rays right now. And there's no denying that. And I think of Brandon sometimes as maybe kind of a quiet leader. And mostly I think that's that because he's been a veteran with us for so long. I mean, course, Randy's been with us for a little longer than I really think of as well. I mean, think back to 2020. It's like, wow, really? He's been with us since then? Yeah. Oh gosh. And all right, I'm going to come back to our good friend, Mr. Franco. And say the absolute worst thing happens and his visa is rejected and he's no longer a Ray. What happens to all that money? Where do you think we spend it? Okay, so worst case scenario, and we lose Franco. The visa's rejected. He's no longer a Ray. Mm-hmm. What do we Rays do with that money? Do we go it's not enough to get Ohtani, is it? I mean, what do you think the Rays would do with that money?
I don't think Ohtani would want to come to Tampa unless they had their new stadium here already. And I think he would consider it then.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. Ohtani's kind of a unique guy. So I don't know. He's available to everybody for now, I would say. Yeah. But the money isn't substantial yet. It grows over time. And to be honest, it was one of the most team-friendly, ridiculous deals ever in the history of Major League Baseball, considering the talent.
Well, you think of the number of years, right?
The maximum he's ever going to make is $25 million. So as an elite player, look around Major League Baseball right now at the number of players that are making 30 plus.
Yeah.
He's never going to make Giancarlo Stanton money ever. He's not. By the time he gets to that age, he'll be too old. And he'll be at the end of his contract and he'll be looking for basically, half that amount if he's lucky. So it's one of those weird deals that I don't know who advised them to take it, but they definitely didn't do him any services. So I think the money is going to be there. Like, I think they would use it for sure. But I think it would take maybe 2 or 3 years before you saw anything substantial. Does it help Tyler Glasnow stick around next year? Probably. That's a good point on that end. Like it would take about 20% of what he's owed next year. So if they make a couple of crafty moves, they can open up the rest of what they need.
Well, it is exciting times. Again, talking with Matt Germain, and Matt, I neglected to say early on, they can find you on Twitter at Matt, and that's MAT_Germain, GERMAIN_. Matt, I'm looking at this, buddy. Here we are. We got 41 games left. Let's see. What kind of percentage do we have to continue to win to hit 100? I think the number 69 somewhere or thereabouts came up for us to hit 100 wins this year as the Rays. Not that that's a critical thing, but, it's a thing. And I'd like to see us get there.
Oh, I'd love to see us get to 101. Beat the record, so they have something new to aim for and then move on from there. But I think the key to me is can they win the division? That to me, that would be a big deal if they did. So we'll hang on to our hats. I think September is going to be tough. But if the Yankees are out of it by then, there's a chance that it helps them and gives them a little bit more of a boost in the end of August when they play them here. And then it'll be about how they do against the Blue Jays and Red Sox, really.
Right, right.
There's a lot of games left against those two teams.
It would be tough to be any one of those three teams' fans right now. And the Yankees, they've got to be pulling their hair out. I mean, everything else we've seen, I know they've been ready to take Boone away. They've been ready to take Cashman away, and it's a tough year for them all the way around. And John Carlos Stanton recently, he had a double or whatever. It seemed like he was just kind of slowly trotting along. It's all the fun I can think of to have. I'm having some technical issues on my end anyway, so I apologize.
It's all good. I've had those before, so I know where you're coming from.
Okay, everybody, well, thank you again for joining us here today on Baseball Biz. That's Mr. Matt Germain. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Matt, MAT_Germain, GERMAIN_. So that's the man. Matt, I can't thank you enough. You've always got more insight on this than anybody I can think of when it comes to understanding where all this talent's coming from, a farm system, and being able to find that talent early on. So thanks for sharing your wisdom with us today, buddy.
Not a problem. Anytime you want, man.
All right. Okay. Take care, bud.
All right. Have a good one.
Special thanks to Matt Germain for joining us here today. Just remember, you can find Matt on Twitter at Matt, M-A-T, _ Germain, Germain _ You can find me, Mark, at The Baseball Biz on Twitter. And you can also find me at Baseball Biz, www.baseballbizondeck.com, and anywhere you like on the directories, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So until next time, thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again real soon. Special thanks to XAKRUX for the music, Rocking Forward.